Hello, Black Eagles. Welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast YouTube channel. Today, we have another special treat for you. We are going to look forward to Beşiktaş's upcoming European opponents, Hradec Králové from Czechia. And joining me right now is Tomas Daníček, Czechian sports journalist. Tomas, some years back, I saw in our messaging history, that you asked me a bunch of questions about Beşiktaş, and today I'm here 5 years later to return the favor and ask you some questions about a team from the Czech Republic. Although we have to say Czechia nowadays, right?
Both is acceptable still. Just Czechia is shorter.
Yeah, for me it's still very much in my mind to just always say Czech Republic. So if I have a Freudian slip here and there, please forgive me. But I have to admit, Hradec is not a club, certainly not a team, but definitely also not a club that I'm too familiar with. Of course, when we think about Czechian football, we think of Slavia Prague, Sparta Prague. In the last 15-20 years, Victoria Pilsen as well. But Hradec Králové is not really a club that's been on my radar too much. And I actually had to look around a little bit to find someone who could give us their insights, because apparently it's not even a club that's followed that closely by all Czechian football journalists. I think I spoke to a colleague of you. I spoke to him... I think his name is David Horejš. I think I spoke to him about Jurasek last year. So I contacted him and he said, "Yeah, I don't follow the club, so I'm afraid you'll have to find someone else." And then fortunately, I remembered I had some traffic with you some years ago. So Hradec Králové, are they a relatively new club on the scene? What's their story? Are they... How have they been on the rise, or is it just something that's gone completely off my radar personally?
Yeah, so first of all, I actually each summer I produce like quite in-depth previews or team profiles for each clubs, and Hradec Králové, for obvious reasons, because their season was fantastic and they were also first basically to face any action in Europe. Mm-hmm. So they already featured, so you can look it up on czechfooty.com. Or your followers. There's quite a lot of information there. They are, I think, indeed a club on the up in terms of like marketing, presentation, everything like that. Like their jerseys are stunning. I even have one at home, even though I'm a neutral, really. But I actually studied in Hradec Králové, so I'm close to the town, at least, not necessarily the club. Mm-hmm. It's a nice university town, so if you also come over for the match, it should be enjoyable. But yeah, as a club, it was definitely sort of out of the nowhere kind of success. They have been around the top six, around the edges for quite some time now, but blossoming into a top four side, I don't think anyone really saw that coming. Even though there were journalists, in fact, from Sports Daily who actually sort of cheekily, tongue-in-cheek, suggested that they might be, after adding Vladimir Darida, who you might remember from Hertha Berlin and Bundesliga generally. He played there for quite some time, and now he's the veteran presence there. But for years and actually decades, Hradec Králové was mostly known for developing the young talent that ultimately blossomed somewhere else, like Václav Pilař, another Bundesliga star for Wolfsburg back in the day, Tomáš Holeš, Jaroslav Zelený. Both of them and many others actually went with the national team to major tournaments, including the World Cup this year. So for that, they have been known, but in terms of pedigree, European one, they are now in UEFA competitions for the first time in 3 decades. So definitely nothing that would fly under the radar. You are correct in saying that they haven't been around, and they actually even got promoted into the Czech top flight, might be like 6 years ago now. So they are quite a recent addition still, but at the same time they have been a top flight club for pretty much the entire period since the promotion.
Yeah, and of course both teams are coming off of two back-to-back victories in Europe. So for Hradec, their first two victories in Europe in at least 3 decades, then I take it. But not unimpressively, because first and foremost last week they came away with a 1-0 win in Norway against Tromsø. And then this week they doubled down and they beat Tromsø again 3-1, despite going down a goal early in the 26th minute. But the equalizer didn't last too long. Just 4 minutes later, they already put the boards back in level. So Hradec is a team that Beşiktaş definitely should not underestimate. Beşiktaş, of course, as well, coming off of a high, eliminating FC Midtjylland by beating them twice, 1-0 in Istanbul last week and 2-0 away this week in Denmark. A team that, going into the tie, Beşiktaş showed a lot of respect for. The Turkish media showed a lot of respect for, because FC Midtjylland finished top 3 in the Europa League stages last season, and they had a very respectable European campaign. But now heading into this tie with Hradec Králové, it's a lot of unknown, because of course, like you already pointed out, they weren't in Europe in recent years. And they're kind of a newcomer on the European scene, so it's difficult to really gauge what to expect from them. Whereas I think Midtjylland was kind of seen as the favorite in the previous tie. Now in Turkey, I'm not really getting the sense that everyone's assuming, okay, Beşiktaş will definitely get past this opponent. But I think it's safe to say Beşiktaş are the favorites. What's the viewpoint like on that in the Czech Republic, in Czechia, given the fact that Hradec just came off of 2 great wins against Tromsø, who are also in the top 3 in Norway right now, which is, of course, Norwegian football. We know it, Bodo Glimt has been kind of in the lift in recent years as well, so definitely nothing to scoff at. So what's the overall vibe going into this tie and the expectations from the general public, the media, and within the club, if you have any sense of that?
Yeah, of course, Hradec is going into this, I think, in terms of experience and probably also quality on paper, as a clear outsider. I think they'll be fine with that position and with that role to play. After all, Tromsø, they were also seen as at least slight favorites, I would say. For Hradec, it will be important to at least get into some sort of a European competition. So of course, if they lose here, they won't be too sad. They still have that Conference League playoff where they might be rather favorites, or at least like odds-on favorites maybe to make it. So that's definitely their goal, and ultimately, actually, they, based on what they said after Tromsø, they've basically checked off the task for this season. Like, they are just mostly happy to be here, and they put in those 2 performances, 2 victories. It must be, of course, said they got tremendously lucky in Norway. Basically, their goalkeeper was the main star there. They snuck out that victory, I would say. Quite luckily. At home, however, they were impressive, powered by the stadium. That's also quite new and definitely has that vibe that sort of threatens the opponents even before you kick the ball. So that's something to look out for. I think at home, generally, they would be strong. But yeah, it must be said, they actually rode the lucky wave for much of the last campaign as well. So you've got to wonder how long it can last, because they were actually good in terms of expected points. They were good for like 35, and they ultimately got 49. So there's like a massive discrepancy. There was a lot of over performances in terms of expected goals. It's of course not a be all kind of statistic. It doesn't rule everything, but it's still a good indicator. And Hradec Králové, in terms of, for example, passivity of the ball and stuff like that, they are rarely in control of those games. So you have to wonder whether they have what it takes to beat Beşiktaş over 2 games. I think the best scenario, in fact, they could realistically hope for is that they beat them at home, and then they try to not maybe lose by too many in Turkey.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the play style that Hradec plays. You already alluded to it a little bit. In the previous tie, it was very much a difficult tie in the sense that Beşiktaş, with their new coach Vincenzo Italiano, is a team that really wants to play on the front foot, high pressing, a lot of dynamic interchanging in positions, fullbacks coming into midfield, and so on and so forth. And Midtjylland is a team that also wants to play in a very similar style. So it was almost kind of a clash of similar styles in that sense. But the way that you're describing Hradec now, it seems like they're a little bit of a different approach. How would you describe their coach? And I'm just going to try and make sure I get the name right here, David Horejš. What's his play style, his philosophy like? And is he the type of coach that, especially in this first leg now, which will be played in Czechia, is he going to try to grab Beşiktaş by the throat early on and like you said, maybe try and get a win at home? Of course, that's instrumental, but how are they going to go about it? What are their biggest weapons? Can you maybe highlight a couple of players that Beşiktaş really need to watch out for as well? And what's their all-round philosophy?
So I mentioned the passivity, but it also cannot be misunderstood in a way that they would be like a sort of deep-sitting defensive side. They are quite the opposite. In fact, it's just that while they want to keep the ball, they circulated it quite well. Generally, they look to keep the ball on the ground, don't hoof it too much. But once they lose it, they sort of drop down a little bit. They are not really ones for, making those forcing those high turnovers, making high ball recoveries in the final third, and that sort of stuff. So they get quite passive quite early. But at the same time, on the ball, they are definitely a positive sort of forward-thinking team that's mostly looking to play, I would say, down the left, especially now that they actually lost their starting right wing back, pretty much the only big absence going into this tie. He most likely or most definitely won't play in either of those games, so you can expect a very left-leaning kind of side where they have a particularly good crosser in Daniel Horák. And crosses and actually set pieces, they are a major part of their game. At least in season 24-25, they scored almost an unhealthy portion of goals from them. In 25-26, they were quite unlucky. In fact, they didn't get as many goals from set pieces, but there's always that threat from Horák I mentioned, but also from others. What they can definitely also provide and rely on is just some clinical finishing. You saw it also against Tromsø. You have very, very good shooters of the ball, like Tomas Daníček. He's a tricky player, just beneath the striker. And basically both of their center forwards now, one of them normally playing a bit of a false right wing these days, Mick van Buren and Ondřej Mihálek, they are pretty much in the form of their lives, both of them at this point. So if they can sustain it, they are once again a good bets to hit it from just about anywhere and to generally find a good position to score from. So I think Hradec Králové, they have definitely a good and solid defensive foundation. I already mentioned the goalkeeper, Adam Zadražel. He was close to a move to Serie A in Italy last summer before the club blocked it, and right now he's sort of getting comfortable at staying at Hradec, not moving anywhere, even though there's still a talk that maybe Slavia, the top club in Czechia, could snap him up later in summer. But either way, he's a very good goalkeeper. He sort of has the odd mistake in him, but at the same time he follows it up with 4 stunning saves. So normally that's forgotten very soon before you even start getting bothered by it. Those would be some key players, but definitely expect some set piece threat, expect some possession-based football, a little bit of passivity off the ball, and also not much, I would say, going down the right side where they would not really have even a second option at the right wing back.
And in terms of weaknesses, can you maybe describe what Hradec struggle with most? For example, against the bigger sides in Czechia, how did they handle teams like Slavia, Sparta, and Victoria Pilsen this past season? Are they a team that crumble under intense pressure, or are they a team that are actually quite capable of playing out from underneath it?
Yeah, it's actually I could have mentioned it among their strengths because they are something of a Bavia over the recent years under this coach. They've beaten them, they've drawn with them, and I guess they might even over the last like 3 seasons they might even have a positive record with Slavia in particular. And the coach himself, when he used to coach České Budějovice, which is kind of a smaller club, even smaller than Hradec Králové, he used to also get quite regularly like positive results against Sparta, for example. So it seems like he, especially and his teams, sort of thrive on this adversity, and being the outsiders, they can definitely surprise you. Once again, especially in the Czech league, I don't know how it's in Turkey, but the outsiders that are like obvious outsiders, they normally resort to like a very negative kind of tactics.
Definitely
where they
same
sit,
in Turkey, yeah.
Yeah, where they sit very deep. So like with Hradec and České Budějovice of the same coach in the past, it was actually like sort of a positive approach to try to hit them on the counter and to be like very to be actually like an intricate opponent to play against in a different way, in a like very forward thinking or positive thinking way. So yeah, I would say, or I would expect and hope that Hradec approaches this game with Beşiktaş as well in a similar way as they do Slavia, because once again, as I mentioned, they basically have nothing to lose really. Nobody is going to criticize them if they don't progress past Beşiktaş in particular.
Yeah. And for FC Midtjylland, it was a big priority to once again get in the Europa League stages, but you already kind of alluded to it that for Hradec, it's already nice that they got this far. I also saw that I think initially they were scheduled to be in the Conference League, but I believe one of the clubs in Czechia got banned from Europe, and that's why Victoria Pilsen and Hradec both moved up a spot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was the match-fixing scandal that's still kind of resonating, in Czechia.
Okay. Yeah, we've had our share of those as well in Turkey. Okay, well, so for Hradec, interesting. They have nothing to lose. That can be a dangerous statistic, I think, for a team like Beşiktaş, who are very much expected to play European League stage football at the bare minimum. And of course, for both sides, getting past this hump will be a huge feat, because it guarantees at least Conference League stage football, which is fantastic for either side, of course. Let's talk a little bit more about the city, about Králové. You said you studied there, and I always like to ask a couple of questions for traveling fans. What should they definitely do when they're there? And you say it's a university city, I believe. So that usually means that there's a great nightlife scene as well.
Yeah, certainly enjoyed a bit of that. I would say, like, of course, also if you go to the Czech Republic and if you're into that sort of thing, and especially drink type, then like, of course, there's a lot of pubs serving good beer and stuff like that. But yeah, also like Hradec Králové, I think it's very like walkable city. Like you have it's quite compact. There's the famous White Tower as well, as a bit of a dominant. They always say that they play under the White Tower, so you can also check that out. The funny thing about traveling there is that I had a friend there for the Tromsø game just this week, and he said that there was a lot of traffic, and like everything was late, and there was one bus going to the stadium per hour and that sort of stuff. So hopefully the city as a whole is better prepared for Beşiktaş coming in, because I would also assume there'll be much more traveling Turkish fans than they were Norwegian ones. That might be tricky, but I would definitely still recommend going there, because as far as Czech towns or university town goes, together maybe with Olomouc, who are sadly not in Europe this year, it's one of the better ones, and yeah, quite nice to visit.
Okay. Finally, then, Tomas, what are your professional expectations for this game as an expert? What do you expect will happen? What is your scenario that you think will play out?
Yeah, so I think Hradec should sneak out like a draw at home, at least, like maybe something like a 1-1. But I'm very worried about the away tie, where I could even imagine like going down 0, like 3-0 or 2-0 or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the game when they sort of run out of luck, as I mentioned. And yeah, but again, it won't be a disaster for them, I guess. They'll just enjoy it.
Okay, well, of course, in Belgium we have a saying, the ball is round, and anything can happen in football, and of course we've seen that many, many times, and you should never celebrate a victory before you've earned it. Beşiktaş will definitely be tested in the next 2 matches by Hradec, as they have tested other big clubs in the Czech Republic in recent years, as you pointed out, David. Tomas, sorry. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you taking out some time in your day and giving us your insights. What was that website again? Czechia Footy or...
Czech Footy, yeah, czechfooty.com. I'm also on Twitter or X these days under the same. So yeah, you can find me anywhere there.
Yeah, go and check that out if you want to find out anything more about Hradec Králové, or upcoming opponents, or any of the other Czechian teams, of course. And thank you very much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you suspect, or expect rather, from the upcoming 2 games. Thursday in Czechia, in Králové, Beşiktaş play away, and then the following week Beşiktaş will host the Czech side at the Tupraş Stadium in Istanbul. Thank you all, and see you soon. Bye bye.